We are about to move on to The Invaders, starring Agnes Moorehead. And, Mark, perhaps I'd love to have you say a few words, introduce us to this episode.
You bet. Well, this, as with Eye of the Beholder, this is directed by the great Douglas Hayes. And Doug was always given the ones that were very tricky technically. And and of course Jerry Goldsmith is the composer. Now, previously on Twilight Zone, generally they would give Jerry Goldsmith the more jazzy episodes. If there was kind of a film noir element or some main character who was like a jazz musician or a petty hood or whatever, and so he would do that theme, da 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 ba da 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 da. And so very percussive, like a Nervous Man in a $4 Room, which Doug also directed. Again, very percussive and so forth. But a lot of people think that of Twilight Zone as a science fiction show, but Twilight Zone was actually science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And The Invaders is very much a science fiction horror story. The ending of Eye of the Beholder sort of slides into horror, but The Invaders is very much, a horror story, and it's written by Richard Matheson, who was one of the other great writers of Twilight Zone, and essentially his idea was that you see this farm woman, and she's attacked by these two little sort of space-suited creatures, and then at the end you discover what you discover about her. And it's very funny because when Doug got the script, he immediately thought of Agnes Moorehead for the role because she was very well known for a radio play by Lucille Fletcher called Sorry, Wrong Number, which was a tour de force of voice acting. And he thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we flipped that and where she has no lines? But of course, being an actor, when she got the script, she flipped through it and there was no dialogue. And she said, well, I have no idea what my role is. And Doug explained it to her, and she said yes. And again, she would play Elizabeth Montgomery's mother on Bewitched, and she also played Citizen Kane's mother. She played Orson Welles' mother
Yes.
in Citizen Kane because she was an actress from the Mercury Theater on the Air, and or the Mercury Theater, and for the little creatures. Again, as I mentioned with Eye of the Beholder, Doug had started as a visual artist. He was an in-betweener on Cinderella at Disney and so forth. And he again hunkered down with William Tuttle in the makeup department to design those little creatures, and he sketched it. And his idea initially was that they would look like the Michelin Man, the guy made out of tires, because they're on apparently a heavy gravity world, and so they would have these big pressure suits, and they were actually made of latex, and they were hand puppets. And Doug, the director, operated the hand puppets, and they could only walk or move their arms, but not both. So you put your two fingers into their legs to have them walk, and then you put your fingers into their arms to have them raise their arms and fire like a ray gun or whatever. And the only voice, the only line of dialogue that you hear other than Serling's narration is at the end that one of the two little guys, one of the two little astronauts, reports back to his home planet. He sends a radio transmission, and that was Doug Hayes. That was the director, because he said to me, since I was operating those little guys, I figured I should be the voice of them as well. And it's an amazing episode, and also it was shot at MGM, as were most of the episodes of the Twilight Zone, and they had access to all of the props, all the costumes, everything, all sets, backlot, everything ever made for any MGM production. So there's a flying saucer that you see at one point, and that was from the movie Forbidden Planet. And fortunately, they made a duplicate when it gets destroyed, so they didn't destroy this amazing prop, from the history of cinema. But Jerry Goldsmith was brought in and to do this amazing episode where the music would have to carry so much of it, and because it's all about horror and being attacked by these two little creatures and fear and suspense. And clearly, now both all the major composers who worked on Twilight Zone were classically trained, of course, so they knew the history of music. And clearly, Danse Macabre is an influence on Jerry Goldsmith in this score. You can definitely hear the violin riffs and so forth. So definitely he's working very consciously within a musical tradition. And but again, he pulls it off just gorgeously. It's a wonderful score, quite the equal of anything else ever done on the show.
Absolutely. Just iconic, all.